So good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to another outstanding Authors at Google Talk. Today we're very pleased to host Trey Ratcliff, who is a famous travel photographer and the publisher of the well-known blog stuckincustoms.com, which is, of course, on my list of websites to visit every day. There's always an awesome image there. Trey is one of the pioneers of the HDR method of photography, and he's one of the main popularizers of the movement. And so the technique aims to make photography fall more in line with what the human eye sees in terms of capturing the dynamic range in a single image. And the technique has really taken off quite a bit. Trey's work was the first HDR photograph to be exhibited in the Smithsonian Institution. He recently released a book that details the practice and method of HDR photography. Many of you have it in front of you. It's called A World in HDR, and he'll be able to sign some copies after the end of our talk today. And of course, we here at Google are really passionate about photography, whether it's through our Google Photo Club we have here, or the work that we do organizing and making universally accessible the pictures of the world, whether it's through Picasa or through our partnerships with Panorama and the Gigapixel program. So we'll also have a Q&A mic at the end of the talk for any questions you may have. Please use the mic for our YouTube audience, and then please join me in welcoming Trey as he discusses the surprising art and science of HDR photography. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, hi y'all. I am very excited to be here. My name is Trey Ratcliff. I'll be talking about the unexpected science and art of HDR photography. So, I got to tell you, I am totally excited to be here. I'm at Google. It's cool. It's cool to be a geek now, isn't it? It didn't used to be cool to be a geek when I was in high school. Believe me, it wasn't cool at all, but now it's all right. And also, another reason that I'm happy to be here and share this stuff with you is, you guys, Google, as a team, you've done so much for me and my family over the past few years. You've really changed my life. You have. And it's been wonderful. And so I'm happy to share this back with you and with everybody watching it at home or at work or when they're supposed to be working or whatever. Everyone's been very supportive of Stuck in Customs, and I'm very happy to get back. I love HDR photography. And I think by the end of this, you will love it as much as I do. So let's get started. So yes, HDR is very controversial. There's a lot of old school photographers that just think HDR is the devil incarnate. And of course, I don't agree with that. You guys are all adults. You're grown-ups. You can look at this and decide for yourself what you think of it. This is an HDR photo. HDR is an acronym for High Dynamic Range. And in short, what it does is it allows you to capture in a final image the same thing that you can see when you're actually there on the scene. This is accomplished in a variety of ways. Normally, it's done by taking multiple photos of a scene, but it can also be done with a single raw photo as well. Like Cliff was mentioning, this is sort of HDR's entree into the mainstream. This is the first HDR photo to hang in the Smithsonian. This is of Austin, Texas, where I live. This made my mom very proud when that happened. And I think it's beautiful. This is how I remember these things. This is a non-HDR photo. I'll show you the HDR version in a minute. This ran in the New York Times. A gentleman named John Tierney has a blog there called Tierney Labs. I suggest you guys go read it if you're into science and whatnot. It's a great science blog. And he asked readers of the New York Times, what's more realistic, this or the HDR version? And there was a healthy debate on there, as you'd expect. But this actually gives me a good occasion to describe what HDR is. This is a normal photo taken with a normal camera. Actually, I took this with a really expensive Nikon camera, a D3X, like a $9,000 camera. And this is about the best you can do without setting up lights and soft boxes and all that mess. Who really has the time for that? That's a lot of effort, right? And who travels with all that stuff anyway? And this isn't what I see when I'm there. When I'm there, I see this. this is what I see. I can see all the individual puzzle pieces. I can see all the detail outside. I can see the warmth of the wood grain. It all makes sense to me. It's natural. Your eye scans around and sees all of this stuff. Now, the way this is accomplished is you normally take multiple photos of the same scene, a dark one, a normal one, and a bright one. And then HDR is an algorithm, right, that runs across this photo. It goes pixel by pixel, and it picks out the best pixel from the various images based on some settings and uses that. So it's different than compositing. It actually happens on a pixel by pixel level. And it's actually quite analogous to what the human eye does as it scans a scene. You know, your eye doesn't operate like a camera. You don't capture a JPEG and store it in your brain. You build this patchwork quilt, this neural network of the scene. This is a very good example of something that only HDR photography can accomplish. You know, you guys have been in these situations where you look, maybe not right into the sun, but you look towards the sun, and you can still see the golden fields, you can still see the blue sky, the clouds. It just makes sense. And the only way to get something like this is really with HDR photography. And I think it comes out beautiful, and it makes sense, and it feels right. This is a remote bamboo forest in Japan. And it was kind of misty that day, and there's just a nice feeling in there. You know, when you see this, you think, is that a photo? What is that? If you can release what you know of as a photo, something new can enter your world, right? It feels right. It feels like more than a photo. Because when I was there, it felt like more than a place. It was a wonderful experience. And I think by using some of these new techniques, you can eventuate what it actually felt like to be there. This is the Taj Mahal in India, of course. A beautiful place. And so many times when you don't have to travel to exotic locations to do HDR photography. That's just sort of an excuse. You can do beautiful HDR work anywhere. But when you are in these places that move you, right? Whether it's a great architectural location or someplace that just means something to you, you might notice that you come back with photos and you show photos to people and you say, well, you had to be there. Right? That's an awful thing to say. It's 2010. You don't have to say that anymore. Now there's technology and algorithms and software that can eventuate in the final picture what you actually experienced when you were on the scene. And I had wonderful feelings when I was here. I set up on a tripod to take the shot. It wasn't quite low enough, so I had to take the Nikon off of the tripod and bury it in the mud right by the... I hated doing it. It was painful. And I went back to the hotel room and I made up all night and I cleaned it in the hotel and made sure it was all clean. And I felt horrible for my Nikon, but it forgave me eventually. I think it came out very nice. This is another part of the Taj Mahal. Now, I mentioned earlier that you take an HDR photo by taking multiple original photos and combining them. Well, you don't always have to do that. You can also do it with just one raw photo. That one raw photo contains a lot of light information. I refer to it sometimes as a cube of light. And you can pull out amazing tones and detail within that. This is a beautiful Treetop Temple in Kyoto, Japan. And this was a multi-exposure shot. And the quick exposure got all of the light inside of the temple, the warmth. The long exposure got these little fire lights down there, these little Ewok villages or whatever they are. It feels nice, right? And this is what I felt when I was there. This is a temple in northern India, in Agra. And I had set up for a normal HDR shot with multiple exposures. And then this Muslim woman started gliding through this temple. And I quickly made some adjustments to the settings because I was going to capture her as a single raw HDR. And at times like this, you can't overthink the aperture and the ISO and all these numbers. You'll just, by the time you figure all that stuff out, the moment's passed. So you have to be a little bit like Luke and turn off the targeting computer and just let it flow, right? And that's when you're really taking photos and really experiencing the world. This is the Perito Moreno Glacier in southern Argentina, Lago, Argentina. These places are wonderful subjects for HDR photography. All landscape is. If you're into landscape photography and you've been doing it for a long time, this is a great excuse to go out and redo it all, because now you can capture everything as you originally saw it. If you see those dark bits of blue, those are icebergs that have turned over, and that's the clearness underneath. This is Chicago. This is another good example of an HDR taken from a single raw photo. I have this great fan and friend there that she rented a helicopter for me for 4 hours, and we took the door off, and I hung out shooting the sunset for 4 hours. It was awesome, and I sent out a tweet on the way up, and the door's off, and made my mom very nervous, and it makes me wonder, why do we invite our moms to Twitter and Facebook and everything? What are we thinking? But everything turned out okay, and this ended up being a pretty good shot. Here's another wonderful example of HDR. You guys have been in places like this where this is Montana. It's cold outside, night is falling. There's wildlife around. You see a warm, cozy cabin. There's a fire inside. There's hot food. There's nice people. You just want to go inside, but you kind of want to take your time and appreciate it as you go in. I think HDR helps to tell that story. It feels right to me. This is what I see and what I experience. And I can teach everyone in this room and everyone watching at home how to do this stuff. I have taught tens of thousands of people around the world how to do it. People just like you, beginner, intermediate, advanced. If you're an old pro trying to learn new tricks, within an hour, you can be up and running with this stuff. On stuckincustoms.com, I have an HDR tutorial. It's free, and you'll have a great time doing it. That's one of the dirty secrets of HDR. It's totally fun. And at the end of that hour, you're going to have something that you can show your friends, your family. You'll impress all of them, but most importantly, you'll impress yourself. Right? That's why we do this stuff, so that you're interesting to yourself. That's why you continue education after you're out of college. Not so that you're interesting to other people. That's BS. You want to be interesting to yourself because you're the central character in your story. This is a tip of my hat to Google Earth. I love Google Earth, and I sometimes envision myself sort of like this old world explorer that would span maps out on the table and mark places I want to go. I do it all with Google Earth now, and I find these remarkable places that I really want to go get there. This is at the very southern tip of Patagonia, and I was trying to get over that hill closer to those mountains. But actually, when you get there, you think, oh my gosh, how do I even get over there? That looks so easy on Google Earth. And so it's a problem. So this night, we couldn't make it. Night was falling. But even when things don't go according to plan, you can still find a way to make a great shot. There's still beautiful things all around. So I went back that night. I was actually there with these 5 Russians. My tent mate was this 300-pound guy named Yuri. And he was just the worst tent mate. He smelled like the inside of a tauntaun. And he was just the worst. And the next morning, we woke up at dark a.m., and it was me and this other guy who's ex-Soviet military, super tough guy. And we climbed up thousands of feet very, very quickly up this icy, sketchy trail. We went over a mountain trying to get to where we wanted to go. And we eventually got to this place. And it was perfect, just lovely. And again, this is the only kind of thing that can be accomplished with HDR photography. Because if I was to expose just for the sky and the mountain, then the snow would have been almost pitch black. And it wasn't pitch black. It had a nice blue glow to it. And those little footprints there where I walked over, I got on all fours and drank out of the water like a horse. It's really nice. It's a nice experience. And that line you see, that's the mountain that I had just come over. It was casting a shadow, kind of made a nice horizon there. So let's talk a little bit about the brain. Not until you trick your brain do you start to realize all the things it's doing for you. I love this cube. This is from this German researcher named Bo Lotto. And this cube alone makes the case for HDR. Do you see the brown square on top and the yellow square in the middle? Those are the exact same color. Now, if I'm going to sit here and say that outside brown is the exact same color as inside yellow, you'd think I'm just totally crazy. I'll prove it in a minute. But let's think about, where does this fiction of color come from? It actually comes from our parents. When you're 2, 3, 4 years old, that's when you learn your colors. What happens is, you have a blue ball, and you go outside, and your mom says, the ball is blue. And you go like, okay, the ball's blue. And then you go back inside, and then your mom says the ball is blue. You're like, okay, the ball is blue. And then let's say you have a brown crayon, right? It's always the longest one because it doesn't get used, right? It's always that's the one that nobody uses because it's ugly. And so you go outside, and the label on it says brown. And then you go inside, and the label on it still says brown, right? Well, is Crayola Corporation, is this a huge conspiracy of color? Why doesn't it change? These are actually very different colors. And we grow up in this sort of colorful fiction of naming these things in our world. Let me show you that these are the exact same color. Go back and forth. Cool. So perception. They say intelligence is the ability to quickly recognize patterns in your neural network. Half the people in here see a rabbit. The other half the people see a duck. What's interesting is that your brain tries to wrap a reality around everything it's seeing. And it's your left brain that's doing its best to categorize it and make sense out of it. Your right brain is actually enjoying the ambiguity and surfing around and wondering, right? It's enjoying that. Your left brain is struggling with it, trying to figure out, what is this thing? And the two play together very nicely in an interesting way. So we do swim in waves. I don't forget who said it. It might have been Einstein, something to the effect of, a fish can never discover the water in which it swims. Well, we're actually smart enough to know that there's this rich spectrum out there of waves, and we only see a very small bit of it, the EM spectrum. But we can do amazing things within that, especially in terms of dark and light. And we have this rich fiction that we've been lying to ourselves all about how to navigate this world, especially in the world of light and shadow. In this example, both A and B are the exact same shade of gray. To prove it, I'll have this gray bar come and cover both. Cool. In this one, the green face towards the top is the same shade of green as the green face facing down. Here comes a green bar to prove it. In this example, all of the blues are the exact same brightness and intensity. Here comes a blue square to cover it up. Cool. So maybe it takes a while for your head to get around the idea of color and whatnot. But HDR is really about light more than it's about color. So the way to understand the way light works is to think about how your brain reacts to it. I got this example from Dr. David Eagleman. He's at the University of Houston. He's a brain researcher. And whenever you see a scene, your brain will immediately adjust to the black, the gray, and the white, and that will become your reality until something else comes along that's even whiter, right? And you go, oh, that's my new white, right? And you kind of trick yourself and go, oh, that really wasn't light before. I was just kidding around. This is the new white, right? And you kind of lie to yourself like that. And then something else comes along that's even more white. You go, oh, that's my new white, all right? And so think about this. When you take photos and you show them to people, they are going to be entering your world for a few seconds, maybe more if you're lucky. And when they're looking at your world, they will adjust the dark and light to whatever you've set up in there. Don't worry about going from the extreme dark to the extreme light. They will become relatively proficient at understanding the light levels inside of your photo for that time period. And of course, that's not white, that is white. So we do swim in these waves, and we only see a very small bit of it. Within the EM spectrum, we have this notion that the Impressionists came to know. I study the Impressionists intensely. Back then, there wasn't such a separation of art and science like there is today. There's a problem with our educational system in which art and science are on these orthogonal paths. I don't think they're that different. I think the more you know about one, the better you can be at another. So the Impressionists, Monet, Renoir, Manet, Caillebotte, Degas, these were masters of light. And they had trouble because they used pigments, right? Not pixels like I'm able to use. And so to make a pure yellow, they had a lot of trouble getting a pure yellow pigment. So they would take a green dot and put it by a red dot. And they knew that at yay distance away from the canvas, the light would mix and give an impression of yellow. Well, we can't do that same sort of thing because we use pixels, but we do similar type tricks, right? We understand the way the eye works, and with certain tricks, you can make things glow and feel like they really do. Y'all might remember this from science class in high school. This is part of the EM spectrum. We can only see from 400 nanometers to 700 nanometers. Within that, we can do an amazing amount of stuff. Now, here's something very interesting. Just beyond 700 nanometers, just beyond the reds, you get into the infrared and thermal IR. So where your eyes stop with color, your skin begins with heat, right? You can think of your skin as an extension of your eyes. When you're there on a scene, you're pulling in everything into your neural network, right? Your brain is recording this information. The analog of between computers and man breaks down at some point because you don't store JPEGs in your brain. You have this rich assortment of colors and feelings and emotions and smells and the people you're with and previous barns that you've seen. All of this is in your neural network. Well, feeds into that is also this heat that you're feeling. You remember if you were cold somewhere or hot somewhere. So if you can start to play with some of these warm colors in your photo, the oranges and the reds, you can actually make the viewer feel warm at a subconscious level. This is a Texas sunset. Now, they don't think about this stuff, but it's there, and it's quite real. And actually, the absence of thermal IR, the absence of reds, is coldness. And by not using these colors in your photos, you can come across some of these sorts of things. That's Fitzroy. This is not too far from Antarctica. I don't add any colors. I don't change the colors in my photos. This is how it really was. It was cold. It feels cold. And I think HDR helps to bring out the proper light levels. So a friend and I started something called HDR Spotting not too long ago. And we started it with the intent of driving more traffic to other HDR artists that are out there. I think that the economy is evolving. I think capitalism is evolving. I think capitalism is fine, but I think there's a second currency out there now called attention. And we've created what we call an attention distribution engine. And as attention becomes more and more important, we think there's a smarter way to distribute it around. So we started this HDR Spotting, and this gives the ability to people to share their photos and drive traffic to their SmugMug, to their portfolio, to their blog, wherever they might want it. I think a lot of photo sharing sites kind of stopped innovating quite a while ago, and I think there's newer, better ways to do this. And this doesn't just work for HDR, it works for any kind of photography or any kind of art for that matter. We're still in beta. It's invite only. You have to know someone to get in. You know how this works at Google. But don't ask me for codes. I don't hand them out, but other people do. And as we get out of beta, it'll become more and more available. And since I'm encouraging everyone here to try HDR and have fun with it, I know you can do it, I also encourage you to start sharing on here. On the back end, we have a system to make sure that people aren't uploading porn or horse MPEGs or weird things. We want to make sure that they get the right level of quality and whatnot. If it gets enough stars, it's editor's pick and so on and so forth. So we're doing our best to give back. And part of the problem I noticed is that I have, on my Flickr, I have 21 million views on my photos. And one photo might have a couple thousand, it might have a couple 100,000. Then I go look at my friend's photo, or even a stranger's photo, that's just as good, if not better. There's so many great HDR photographers out there. There's so many great photographers of all kinds. And they might only have a few dozen views, right, or a few hundred views. And it doesn't seem to add up, right? It's because the internet is not properly distributing attention and getting the interesting kind of art to the right kind of people. So now with HDR Spotting, people are getting hundreds and thousands of views, and it's just great. And it's not a scorecard, right? It's just that I think artists and all of us just want to share our stuff. And why? I think we just want to know we exist, right? And as other people enter our world and as we affect them in minute ways, we know we exist. And I think that's important to everybody, whether you're an artist or not. So as we move forward in the digital world, the idea of sharing art and being an artist is emerging. I think we are approaching this sort of singularity, right? This is probably a good place to ask. How long do we have into the singularity? About 15 years or so? We've got a few more doublings between now and then. What's going to happen? I don't know, but I plan on having a good time between now and then. It's going to be tremendously fun, and I think this is going to be a great decade for artists. I think that now that people like Google and Twitter and all these other great companies around the world have wired up the left brain of the internet, now it's the creative sides that can come out and start using this infrastructure. This is Gullfoss in Iceland. It's this icy waterfall. Ancient theologians used to think this was the entrance to hell. Hell was originally a cold place in Dante's hell. And they would advise that if you had a loved one that you thought was in hell, you would come and dive down into here to rescue them. And I don't think it ever turned out very well, but it is a real slippery place. And I remember I was walking through, and I had my tripod and all that stuff, and the ground was already super icy. And the mist from the waterfall made these little beads of water, and it almost gave the ground this negative friction. And I slipped out, and I fell, and I saved my camera, of course, and started sliding down, right? And there was this yellow rope above me, and I reached up and I grabbed the yellow rope, and it saved me. So as we're all kind of slipping down towards this point, there's really no yellow rope anymore, is there? We're just going. And I don't know what's going to happen, but I think it'll be kind of fun, and I think it'll be a good time. So as we march forward, there is a new culture emerging, right? There is sort of an old culture, which will always exist, but people on the internet, they want beautiful things to look at, they want beautiful things to experience, they want nice music to listen to. And I think this will be the decade of artists. I'm very excited about it. So let's move through some images here. Let me switch to a different presentation. So this is sort of a bunch of different pictures from my portfolio that shows what you can do with HDR photography. This is my family, my 3 kids at Christmas. I think it's a beautiful way to capture the world. This is Christmas to me, right? Warm fires, happy kids, family. It's nice. This is Hong Kong. Cities do great in HDR. It's a wonderful milieu for HDR photography. If you're into black and white photography, you can also do amazing things. This will bring all new textures to you that you might not have ever been able to pull out before. This is HDR out of 90 shots. It was crazy. I'll never do that again. But it came out pretty good. This is in Chernobyl. My mom also was not happy when she found out I was in Chernobyl. But it was really cool. This is what an old school photographer might call a subtle use of HDR, right? It's very, you can just hear it, can't you? This sort of the dripping with condescension. They go, oh, I like HDR, but only if it's subtly applied. It's so wonderfully judgmental, isn't it? We hear that a lot, me and there's so many HDR photographers out there that are good. And I'm happy to fight for them and fight for all of us because clearly this is the way that I see the world, the way I experience it, and what makes sense to me. I don't know about y'all, but this is a really cool shot, isn't it? I would love to live in a house with a grass roof. It seems cozy. So when I go through life, I picture it like I'm in this Tolkien-esque novel, right? And people and scenes come in and out of my world. And I want to be able to capture it as such. I see things in a rich, romantic, kind of story-esque way. And I think this is a very nice way for me just to, document my own life. And insofar as other people find it interesting, that's great. I think this is a really, really fun way to experience and kind of chronicle your life. Now, technically, I'll jump back and forth between technical stuff and whatnot, but most of my images, I would say, are accomplished from going from +2 to -2. Well, what does that mean? Well, most DSLRs have a setting called auto bracketing, right, or exposure bracketing, where you take multiple photos of a scene. And that really means how quick the shutter speed is. So typically, let's say a 3 exposure HDR. The -2 is the fast shutter speed that's very dark, but all of the bright spots have all of the details perfectly laid out. there's a normal shot at 0, and there's a +2, which is very bright and almost blown out, except in that one, the shadows are perfectly exposed. So that range from -2 to +2 is good enough for 90% of situations. I've heard some people say that the human eye can see 11 stops, right, instead of 5 stops, which is +2 to -2. I don't know if that's true. I don't really know how you measure that. I know when I go into a dark area, it takes me a few minutes to adjust, and maybe that gets me to the 11 stops. I'm not sure. But I do know from experience, I've taken a ton of HDR shots, and +2 to -2 is enough. I shoot with a Nikon D3X, and I have to take 5 exposures. I do -2, -1, 0, +1, +2, only because I can't set mine to step by 2. I wish I could. I wish I could get in that firmware. Nikon, I'm still waiting for your call. We need to fix this stuff up. I need to get into there and hack this around. Now, occasionally I will go +3 to -3 when I'm shooting into the sun. Because the sun, of course, is nothing brighter than that out there. And that seems to do the trick. That's 7 exposures for me from -3 to +3. So I advise that everybody else does the same. And most DSLR cameras have this setting. And all that's in the tutorial. The other nice thing about the tutorial is there is a section at the end on how to do this with a single RAW photo. So let's say you've been taking photos for a long time, and you have a lot of photos that are just sitting around in RAW. You can go back and process those in HDR and have a lot of fun with it. I advise that. So typically when I speak to groups, I notice that about 70% of people see the world like I do, in this rich, vibrant, romantic way. Another 30% of people don't, right? They just see it in a different way. Now, these are not like the HDR haters, right? I ignore them. They're not even in my cone of vision. I picture like I'm playing a game and these are NPCs, and I just ignore these guys, right? But the other 30% just see the world differently than me. Not better or worse, just different. When I see it, and probably most of y'all see it, I look at, well, we have this neural network in our brains, right? And we pattern match, we filter stuff as it comes in. And the way I rank stuff is first I look at light, color, and saturation, and then I look at line, contrast, and shape. I see it all, but my filtering mechanism is different. I think the other 30%, there's some gray area there, I think first they see line, contrast, and shape, and then they see color, saturation, and light. Not better or worse, it's just a different filtering mechanism. And we all have our own experience of how we view and how we categorize and chronicle the world. And this is maybe particular to me, but I think we all have our own particular upbringing and the way we come to know and see the world and record it. Mine might be a little bit unique in that I was born blind in one eye. I can only see out of my left eye. So I don't see in 3D. I only see in 2D. And when you're born, your eyes are hooked into your brain, just like your legs are hooked into your brain. Well, your legs, it takes a couple of years to really know how to use them right, doesn't it? So what makes you think that your eyes immediately know how to be used? It takes many, many years of training and experience. So I came up with my own system for viewing the world. It's not better or worse, it's just different. And I play sports, and I'm fully functioning and all this sort of stuff, right? But when I play soccer, I don't use parallax like everybody else does. I use the diameter of the ball to judge how far it is from my body. And you'll notice that people, when they're in the middle of conversation with 2 eyes, they'll do subtle movements of their head just so they can use parallax to know where in Z space everybody is, because it's important, right, for your brain. You know, for survival reasons, is this person a threat? Are they a mating opportunity? Do they have food? What are their hands doing? You care about this stuff at a very base level, right? So I've just come up with my own system, and so it's been very easy for me to take photos. Because when I look at a scene, I immediately compose it, right? There's no struggle for me. It's just very natural. Now, I think a lot of people who are probably photographers, when something is composed, right? It just feels right. It just feels like a beautiful composition. And that's one of the thrills we get, isn't it? When we have a camera and we set up a scene and we click and we just know when it's properly composed, it feels good. What you're doing is you're taking the entropy of the world and you're adding your own beautiful interpretation of it, right? You're taking this chaos and you're making order out of it, even if just temporarily, right? That's why we can't stand to have forks kind of sideways on the, we got to make them right. We have this human need to fight against entropy. And I think that same thing happens with photography. It's such a chaotic place out there, and if we could just bring a little bit of reason and beauty to it in a moment, it's wonderful. So there's this great thing called phi. It's the golden ratio. Probably some of y'all have heard of it. It's known to mathematicians and to architects and a few trivial type things like that. But what happens is it's this magical number, 1.618. It goes on kind of like pi. And it was discovered by Fibonacci, this Italian mathematician. A Fibonacci sequence is a new number is always the sum of the two previous numbers. It goes 1, 2, 3, then 2 plus 3 is 5, then 5 plus 3 is 8, 8 plus 5 is 13, so on and so forth. Now, if you divide the most recent number by the number just before it, you get something close to 1.618. In fact, once you've gone about 13 numbers deep into a Fibonacci sequence, you get very, very close to 1.618. Interesting that it's a prime number when it begins. And this number is the ratio of beauty. You know when you look at something and it just feels right. It just feels beautiful. That's because something has lined up along this ratio of 1 to 1.618. If you look at the proportions of a face, of a body, of what is perfect, of what is beautiful, that is at 1.618. If you look at the way the petals splay out in a flower, that's at that ratio, a conch shell. If you look at great ancient old buildings, the Greek architects knew this, right? So there is something magical about this number. And when you line up your photos, the closer you can get to this magical point, the more it just feels right to the viewer, right? So a lot of times you can't explain, but there is math behind all this stuff, and it feels right and it feels natural. You know, in photography school and in books and whatever, they talk about this thing, the rule of thirds. I think that's sort of a poor man's version of phi, right? I think if you can start learning these phi points and position your cropping around that, eventually you won't have to crop, you'll just get it right in the camera. But you can approach this point of just sort of natural beauty. I think that makes sense. I came about all of this photography through sort of a back door. I got my first camera only about 3 or 4 years ago. I've never taken a photography class. I've never read a book. I don't know the right way to do anything. I don't think there is a right way to do anything. I think that the process is important, and the process should be one of guessing, trying, making a mistake, and then forgiving yourself and moving on. That's something it's hard for us to do in sort of a Western society, is to forgive ourselves. We've always put these guilt trips on ourselves, which kind of holds us back, right, and makes us afraid to experiment. But you should get in the habit of guessing how someone does something, try it, mess up, forgive yourself, and move on, and try not to do it again. This is the same process I do with everything, and it just seems to work out very, very well. I encourage people to try that. You'll notice that one of the problems commonly with HDR photography is something called ghosting. Okay, ghosting is when you take multiple photos, and some of these photos are going to have, let's say, a dog running across, right? And he'll be in 3 different positions for the 3 different pictures, and that's a problem, right? But there's a few ways to get past that problem. One way is to, when you take your original pictures, make them all in RAW, and pick the one RAW file where the dog is in the most interesting position, and use that to make the HDR. That's one method. Another method is to go ahead and allow the ghosting, and then bring that ghosted image into Photoshop as a top layer, bring one of the original RAWs underneath, and then remix the two by masking through or erasing through and putting in the proper dog. So that's another way to do it. There's a few other little tricks you can do, but those are the 2 big ways. A lot of times I leave ghosting, like in this ocean shot. I left ghosting in the waves because I feel like it has an element of emotion, right? It seems to make sense that there's movement and water, and the same one with here in Boston. It just feels right that there's some motion there. I just finished this wonderful book. If you're into Impressionism and art or whatever, it's called The Judgment of Paris. I heard it on Audible. It's like a 16-hour epic. And it talks all about what the Impressionists went through to get their art accepted by the French establishment. They didn't have the internet. The only way to get a photo shown was to be in the salon. And to get into the salon, you had to pass this committee of octogenarians, these old masters who were just not ready to let this new school in. They thought the proper way to make a painting was to properly depict the heroic nature of man, to show Greek gods, to show French generals, to show the amazing moral absolutism of mankind. And so these Impressionists came along, and they would actually use the new technology of the day. They could take paints out into the field and paint the light exactly how they saw it. And it was very off-putting to the old school. So the reason I went into all that is to say that there's not really necessarily a right way to go about it. And when it comes to ghosting, it's okay to have some adjustment there. Let the viewer guess what's happening. Renoir said that no painting should be perfect. There should be some mystery. There should be something you're not telling them. There should be the impression of what is really happening. The establishment back then, there was a guy named Ernest Meissonier. He was the richest, most wealthy French painter of the day. Very exacting battle paintings. And his magnum opus was this painting called Friedland. And it took him 10 years to make. And he hated the Impressionists because of their rough sketches. And he was very exacting. And he was known for painting horses in all their glory. And so what he did, he was very wealthy. He built a railway station at his house, and he had a train on there, and he had people push him along a train by hand while one of his horses would run by, and he'd sit there and sketch the exact musculature of the horse. And so he displayed his painting finally at the salon after 10 years, and the critics were always on his side. They actually lambasted him because it was so exact. They said it looked like the horse had been flayed of his skin. Just then they were starting to come around to the Impressionist because it gave them a feeling of being there. And there's something more to art than being exact. There's something magical about it. My daughter, Isabella, I have 3 kids. She's my middle child. She's 4. And she has this wonderful thin membrane between what's real and what's not real. And if any of you all have kids, you know exactly what I mean. And it helps you to realize the wonderful things the brain can do and the bad things it does to adults. And, so I'm with my daughter Isabella. I don't know where she got this, but she got this idea that whenever we see Christmas lights around trees or on a house, she goes, Tinkerbell's been here. She gets really excited, right? And so I start to wonder, does she really think that Tinkerbell's been there? Or is she just tricking herself and enjoying it? Or does she even take it to that level? And then I think, does it really matter? They surf between what's real and what's not real so easily. And it's wonderful. And I think actually grown-ups like to do that too. But we're not allowed to, right? Because we have to pay our taxes and buy stamps and make sure there's coffee in the morning. And there's this left-brain world that we're stuck in. And the only time we're allowed to escape is once a week when we go to the movie theater. In public, they lower the lights and we can escape into what's on the screen. That's the only time it's publicly acceptable to have a fanciful life. But I think we all long for it because it feels right, doesn't it? I think finally the world is changing and we can be free. I think we all have this wonderful artistic side that's waiting to come out. But no one has told you it's okay to let it come out. I'm here to tell you it's perfectly okay. It's natural. There's something happening interesting on the internet, I think. There's this idea of Dunbar's number. Maybe some of you guys have heard of this. I first came across it in Guns, Germs, and Steel. I think it's a Jared Diamond book. It's an anthropological concept. By the way, I've got this great reading list if you're interested in reading more about any of this stuff. In fact, I've got this, it's a reading list and a link to this TED video of Jill Bolt Taylor talking about the left and the right brain. She's actually this brain researcher that had a stroke and she recorded the whole thing as it happened in her left brain. It's very interesting. If there's any doubt in your mind that maybe left and right brain is psychobabble, it's not. It's all very, very real. And so with Dunbar's number, there's a few texts I have on it in these various books. What it means is that we all can keep track of about 150 people or so, okay? And it comes from our villager days, right? When we kept track of our immediate family, our secondary family, the village elders, the warriors, the medicine man. It's about 150 people or so that you keep track of, right? Men are very good at keeping track of direct relationships and that sort of thing. Women are particularly good at keeping track of relationships, secondary and tertiary, and they remember all this stuff, right? And actually, it's very important for the cohesion to have women keeping track of who wrongs who and whatnot. That's why they remember. That's why they don't forget. It's deep in them. And now we don't live in villages anymore, do we? We're all spread out all over creation in suburbia. But we still have to keep track of about 150 people. And our 150 people has really gotten messed up. By the way, this is my own half-baked theory, but I think it makes sense. Maybe you guys can bake the other half. And it is that we do keep track of about 75 family members and close friends, but the other 75 people or so have been blasted into our homes by Hollywood, because that's our village now, right? We all kind of know vaguely who Brad Pitt is dating, right? Why? Right? Why do we care? Well, we can't help but care. I used to get on planes and walk through first class, and very, very intelligent people were sitting there reading Us and People. And I think, what are they doing? But they can't help it. They've got to keep track of these people. They've got to keep track of, because celebrities have accidentally become part of our Dunbars 150. Well, I think now, thanks to Twitter and the internet, we're able to come up with a proper 150, right? We're able to get rid of people like Elaine Boozler, right? Why is she in my 150? She doesn't need to be in my 150. I can get rid of her, and I can replace her with someone that has meaning in my life. Maybe it's an artist, maybe it's a poet, and I can follow them on Twitter and these sorts of tools. I think we'll find that 150 to 200 is about the magical number of people to follow, because that's what makes sense. That's what strikes us on a deep level. This is in Yellowstone. By the way, if any of you guys have any questions about these particular images, we can do it in Q&A afterwards. This is Bangkok. It's called the Veins of Bangkok. As I've traveled around, I've been lucky to meet other great photographers and HDR photographers all over the world. And we go out and we exchange ideas, we shoot all day, we post-process all night, and just have a ball of it. And everyone does things a little bit different. So I've been able to take their techniques and their successes and integrate them with my own and come up with something that's wonderfully unique, I think. It's different. I wouldn't say that I do straight up HDR photography. I would say it kind of falls in that realm, right? And there's a lot of old school photographers that have not yet crossed the Rubicon, let's say, into the world of HDR. Maybe they've dipped a toe in, and I think it's interesting. But I think over time that they will see, as everyone will see, that this is not necessarily the evolution of photography, but it is a evolution of photography. And if you see the world like this, like I do, then it's a tremendous set of tools to add to your arsenal. You'll see that sometimes I really amp it up, and sometimes I'm not quite so amped up. It just depends on my mood and how artistic I'm feeling, or what song is playing while I'm editing these things. It's a wonderful kind of right brain experience. I edit these things at night after my kids go to sleep. This is Iceland. Iceland is a wonderful place for HDR photography. We're used to these places in the US that have all these boardwalks and whatnot. It's just wild there. This is Hans Zimmer's studio. He's one of my favorite artists. I was very lucky to use my network, my 7 degrees of separation, to find out I was lucky, and I was only 1 degree away from Hans Zimmer. So I got into his studio to shoot it. It was wonderful. This is Seoul, Korea. It's great to take night shots with HDR photography, because it's not as simple as just leaving the shutter open and letting light come in. There's all kinds of light levels there that you don't really know that you have access to. When it comes to different ways of thinking about light, I I recommend, among other books, there's some great works by Richard Feynman. One of his favorite books that I've written is called The Pleasure of Finding Things Out. And it's a different way to think about the world, right? It's actually a collection of his essays that all kind of revolve around this central topic of ways to think about thinking. And a lot of it involves the idea of not worrying so much about the names of things and how other people have a common lexicon for stuff. It is how they think, how they behave, how they act, and what they do that matters rather than what they're called. So I don't get caught up in a lot of this kind of stuff about how do you talk about certain subjects. I just let it flow, right? And I get some flack sometimes from photographers who just want to know the hardcore technology of how it happens, right? They want to know, they want to discuss optics and some of the particular things about it. I'm much more into the whole experience of it. And not until you really let go, and what you need to do is understand the technology, the basics of it with your left brain, but then let your right brain kind of execute on it. That's what makes sense to me. So these things that Feynman discusses, he bleeds into all kinds of various areas, like so much of human conversation is this act of getting one perspective to mesh with another perspective. You spend so much time trying to explain yourself to someone else, they have to take all your words and rearrange them to their own worldview. And it's the same idea as colors, right? Maybe my red is not your red. And it's not just red, but it's every other word in the human language that we've come to know. And you've come up with your own internal system for this. That's all fine and well, and that's exciting, but you should let go of that stuff and just let it flow. It's a very, very difficult concept to get your head around, but once it happens, it becomes very natural, very easy. Do you see those two people right at the very top? Tiny. That's a huge thing called the Grand Prismatic. I found that one also on Google Earth. There's this boardwalk that everybody else goes down. I didn't want to go down there. I don't like all these tourists around. So I like to go up, and we climbed up this mountain and shot down at the Grand Prismatic. So I'll leave you with these final images. This is Argentina. I woke up one morning, my sleeping bag was covered in snow. After I had vacated the tent, I was sick of Uri. Walked around the forest just as the snow was penetrating the autumn leaves. It was just gorgeous, this magical experience. I made it out into the plains. Saw this beautiful landscape. It really is a beautiful world out there. I encourage you all to go out there, accept it and feel it and capture it in your own way. I think that is a wonderful way to live your own adventure. I want to leave you with this thought that the left brain is for getting through life and the right brain is for living. Thank you very much. So any questions? How long do we have, timekeeper? 10 minutes. All right. Yes, sir.
So photographers have been doing dodging and burning for at least a century. Is HDR qualitatively different from that, or no? Is it just a way of automating dodging and burning in a computer?
So is it that different than dodging and burning? Well, I guess in one instance it's not. Dodging and burning almost takes on the idea of painting on the picture to me, right? Because you do have to go in with a brush and dodge one area and burn another. For the uninitiated, dodging is lightening an area, burning is darkening an area. Now, dodging and burning work to a certain degree, and they will generally lighten and darken an area, but it doesn't necessarily go through the entire tonal range that the other exposures have captured. Right? Maybe one of the exposures has captured a different tone of blue that you're unable to dodge to. Now, also, another problem with dodging and burning is it takes a long time and requires a lot of meticulousness, especially with today's photos at 12 megapixels or 24 megapixels. If you're going to get in and dodge and burn on a very small level, it would take an eternity. This goes through, these HDR algorithms, goes through on a pixel by pixel level and does most of that work for you based on certain settings. So I think it's easier, it's much more, a much more batch way of doing it. Does that make sense? Yes, sir.
Hi, I have a question regarding the reproduction of these HDR pictures, because the camera with the multiple exposure can capture a very high dynamic range, but when you reproduce them on a screen like here, you're limited to a 100:1 contrast ratio. So
That's right.
I was wondering if maybe there are other media that reproduce these images better, like high dynamic range monitors.
Well, that's a good question. There are a few technophiles that do foresee a future of HDR monitors. I don't. I don't think HDR monitors will ever catch on for a number of reasons. One, there's not enough HDR content to warrant such an expensive device, especially in small quantities would be extremely expensive. Even though it might actually be a better viewing experience, I don't think they'll ever catch on. And second, this tone mapping that I'm doing, when it's displayed on a screen, it's actually good enough, right? It looks so pretty and so nice that you don't feel like you need a better monitor to see it because it already feels good enough. I am not the biggest expert in the world on display technologies, but I do kind of feel the same way about regular DVD and Blu-ray DVD. I think the average person can't see that much difference, so there's not that much impetus to dump everything old and go the new way, especially when it comes to something as expensive as what will inevitably be an HDR display, which are going to be extremely expensive. You know, who knows which way the future is going to go. But in my opinion, this is good enough. Now, there's one viewing issue with HDR photography. I believe the screen has to be big enough so that your eye actually travels around, right? Because if all that light hits you at the same time, your brain might reject it as too much. If you can actually physically make the eye biologically move around and take in different light and build that patchwork quilt just like it does on the scene, it makes it much easier for the brain to accept it.
I see. So for mixed illuminant scenes, do you compensate for the different illuminants to remove the color cast? Because for instance, when I'm indoors and I look outside, I might have some incandescent light indoors, which is like very yellow, but the outside is bluish because of the sky. So if I just leave the image like this, it will have a very pronounced color cast that creates a bit of a tension in the image, which is not what the eye sees.
Right. Well, that gets very tricky, right? Because your light, your camera is capturing whatever light is there, and as we saw in some of those examples, what light really is there? What is light and dark? What is the brown? What are all these colors? So what I've learned to do is when I'm there on the scene, I remember it as best I can. I remember the feelings of the colors, and I kind of equate them to sounds and smells and somewhat of a synesthetic fusion. And then I try to bring that back later when I'm editing the photos to make sure that the greens and browns and blues make sense. I think that there is this sort of golden ratio of line and shape in the photo, but I also feel like there's something there with the colors. At some point, if you jam the colors one way too far, you lose that beautiful translation and tone mapping between the two. I think this is something that comes with time and practice.
So color processing is part of your post-processing?
I do a bit of color processing, but mostly it's how intense do I want to make one color or another. I don't go through and paint on top of these items. Now you did see some of these that have a texture overlay. I have a textures tutorial on the website. That one isn't free. But sometimes when a photo comes out too boring and I want to give it a little bit of panache or something, I'll put one of these textures or multiple textures over it to give it a bit of feeling. That's the only time that I really dramatically adjust the color of something. But I actually, whenever I go in and I change the white point or I change something, it dramatically changes the colors. And either it feels right or it doesn't feel right. I just move it around until it feels right.
I see.
I'm sure that's not the most scientific answer, but it's the best I can do.
Well, thank you very much.
Sure. There's no other questions. You guys can always send me tweets. I do my best to answer all tweets. If you have questions about the book or about the processing or on your own journey through this stuff, I can't answer everybody. I'm a little bit covered up, but I'll do my best. And again, thank you guys for your time.